Hello, my name is Charles Upton. I'm going to read something now called Romantic Love versus Cultural Marxism in response to the present troubles here in month of June 2020. Quickly, before I read this, romantic love, I'm talking about the medieval version of it, that is such as known as from Dante, the troubadours, the Arthurian romances and such, which is very different from the later version of the sentimental version. Perhaps my interest in this developed partly because I happen to be descended from Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was very big in courtly love. Quickly defining it or talking about where it came from, I believe that the whole courtly love or romantic love tradition in the West was as if the product of a marriage between the Celtic lore, which was still there in Western Europe, still available in Western Europe, even after Christianity came, and heroic and chivalrous Islam, being the bride and the groom, and they concluded a marriage, and the minister of that marriage was Jesus Christ, because this is something that could only have happened within the alchemical vessel of Western Christendom. Okay. Another influence was apparently the Knights Templar. Remember, Saint Bernard, who composed the Order of the Knights Templar, was probably the first one to talk about the Virgin Mary, to address the Virgin Mary as Our Lady, which he took directly from the courtly love tradition. And there's also a story that the Templars worshipped a holy woman who was not the Virgin Mary. One explanation for this is when they took over the Holy Land from Saladin, who was a Sunni, the Shia Muslims who had been suppressed by the Sunnis came out of the woodwork, went to the Templars and said, "We are the true Islam, and we also don't like these Sunnis." Something like that. And of course, who do the Shia venerate? It is Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So with that introduction, I'm going to read something. Oh, also, I should say, this is all dedicated to Mikhaila Peterson. She was the inspiration for my putting this together. So this is about romantic love versus cultural Marxism, starting with the exoteric dimension. This is a letter or email I just sent to Mikhaila Peterson. It was like this. Dear Mikhaila, can you or anyone on your blog comment on the vicious, politically correct notion that if a man compliments a woman on her beauty, no matter how respectfully and courteously he does so, he is actually attacking her? Can you or anyone comment on the idea that beauty cannot be a possession of the ego, because when the ego tries to possess beauty, it becomes ugliness, as with Madonna, for example, right? Can you or anyone comment on the idea that physical beauty must bring suffering with it, precisely because it is a gift of God, and all of God's gifts require us to suffer to live up to them? Can you or anyone comment on the rule from the courtly love tradition that the lady must impose severe tests upon the knight who courts her, firstly, so she doesn't sell herself short, and secondly, to give him a way to mortify his own immaturity and concupiscence so he can become worthy of her, these enemies being the dragon he must slay to win her? As I see it, the ethos of romantic love in its traditional medieval form as Dante expressed it, not in its later sentimental Hollywood decadence, is the one foundational element of Western civilization that is most violently suppressed by cultural Marxism. Even more so than Christianity. Consequently, only those who can deal with romantic love have been entirely purified of the virus of political correctness. My wife Jenny also directs me to repeat something I just said to her, that without romantic love, there is no way that she and I could have stayed married and in love for 43 years. Sincerely, Charles Upton. Second one, this is the esoteric dimension of romantic love. This is taken from a commentary I made to my wife's, Jenny's book, The Ordeal of Mercy, the Purgatorio of Dante Alighieri in Light of the Spiritual Path. So I wrote some little essay commentaries, and this is one of them. This is called On Romance, Alchemy, Scholastic Philosophy, Sufism, and the Fedeli d'Amore. So in addition to the motif of ascent, the other keynote of the Purgatorio is polarity, the play of opposites. The purgatorial ascent is dialectical in nature. This quality of polarity gives it an affinity both with alchemy, based as it is on salve et coagula, the dissolution of false unions and the consummation of true ones, as well as with the tradition of romantic love, an affinity which in Dante's case undoubtedly derived in part from the Fedeli d'Amore or Fede Santa, the esoteric spiritual order with which he is reputed to have been associated, along with Guido Cavalcanti, Cino da Pistoia, Moruelo Malaspina, Pedro de Pisa, Boccaccio, Petrarch, Andreas Capellanis, Cardinal Francesco Barberino, Dino Compagni, and Brunetto Latini. The Fedeli d'Amore are often characterized as a third lay order of the Knights Templars. René Guénon, Julius Evola, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, Luigi Valli, Eugene Aru, Mircea Eliade, Alfonso Ricolfi, Arthur Schult, Henry Corbin, William Anderson, and others have published researches on this order. There are indications that the Fedeli d'Amore might have had certain affinities with Tasawwuf or Islamic Sufism, perhaps deriving from esoteric contacts made by the Templars in the Holy Land. In the words of one initiate who wishes to remain anonymous, it is said that the three secrets of the Fedeli d'Amore were love, beauty, and the heart. Suhrawardi, the Persian Sufi and Ishraqi or Illuminist, speaks of beauty, love, and nostalgia, which perhaps refers to remembrance in its spiritual sense. The Sufi Zikr, the Hesychast Mnimi Thayu, remembrance of God. This is the visible, communicable secret. The second secret reserved to the initiates is that one must learn how to read the rule of divine love in the book of human love. The third secret belongs to adepts. It is the faith of the faithful, which is the direct vision of God in a human form, beautiful to contemplate, but without the agitation of the carnal nature. The Fedeli d'Amore appeared to the later Sufis as an unexpected variant of the Shadiliya. Their particular way of symbolically mixing love and poetry is common to both systems. That's what he says. So Mircea Eliade, in Rites and Symbols of Initiation, writes as follows of the symbolism employed by the order. Woman symbolizes the transcendent intellect, wisdom. Love of a woman awakens the adept from the lethargy into which the Christian world had fallen because of the spiritual unworthiness of the Pope. Quite a timely sentiment. In the writings of the Fedeli d'Amore, we find allusions to a widow who is no widow. This is Madonna Intelligenza, who was left a widow because her husband, the Pope, died to spiritual life by devoting himself entirely to things temporal. Okay, the redemptive polarity, I say, between the knight and his lady in the courtly love tradition can be considered as the outer, though no less esoteric, aspect of the alchemical union of sulfur and quicksilver. Sulfur is identified by Titus Burckhardt in his book Alchemy, Science of the Cosmos, Science of the Soul, with the Aristotelian scholastic forma, as quicksilver is with materia. According to Jacques Thomas in Aperçu sur l'opération intellectuelle et la connaissance initiatique, 1998, he says, in the same way as in the formation of an individual being, forma is united with materia. The act of the intellect is marked by the conjunction, the copulatio, of the possible intellect with the active intellect, that is part of the transcendent intellect, or intelligence, itself emanating from wisdom. The passive intellectual principle receives the reflection of the universal ideas of the omniform light of the active intellect, which, in a certain way, brings to real existence the colors that are potential within it. Dante's laborious ascent of the mountain of purgatory, at whose summit Beatrice appears, reminds us of the difficult task often imposed upon the knight by his lady. Just as the personality of the knight must be purged of subhuman lust and vanity in order to become worthy of union with his beloved, so the soul in purgatory must be purified of the 7 deadly sins so as to fit itself for union with God. And the rhythm of this purgation proceeds by alternations, contraries. The successive terraces of the mountain of purgatory correspond in many ways to the various maqamat, or stations, of the spiritual path according to Sufism. Stations that often manifest as contrary states, such as fear and hope, contraction and expansion, gathering and dispersion, intoxication and sobriety, fluctuation and stability, presence and absence, and annihilation and subsistence. See Sufism 2 and Sufism 3 by Javad Nurbakhsh, Khanikahi Ni'matullahi Publications, 1982 and 1985. A similar schema of spiritual development is found in the Ladder of Divine Ascent by St. John Callimachus, which has been copiously quoted in this book, in my wife's book, The Ordeal of Mercy. These polarities also appear in the Grail material, especially in the Parsifal of Wolfram von Eschenbach, the most alchemical of the Arthurian romances, in the guise of love unions and knightly jousts. Two come together in one way or another to fight, to make love. That dance. According to the esoteric dimension of the courtly love tradition, the lady is forma, a manifestation of the active intellect or necessary being, while the knight represents materia, the receptive intellect, or the intellect that must become receptive through struggle and sacrifice, and thus of possible being. This, of course, reverses the traditional gender attributions of forma and materia, just as the lovers Krishna and Radha in the Sahaja poetry of India are sometimes pictured dressed in each other's clothes. In the words of the Quran, 2:187, they, the wives, are raiment for you, and ye, the husbands, are raiment for them. The knight has needs, goals, agendas. The lady is complete in herself. Her severity, her intrinsic inaccessibility, simply indicates her lack of needs, as opposed to the unfulfilled needs of the knight, who is the human soul yet to become self-actualized through its union with holy wisdom. He is seeker, she the sought. In the spiritually immature soul, potency can only be transformed into act by meeting the challenges and completing the tasks that she imposes upon it. Dante's Beatrice is thus the highest and most complete incarnation of the lady of courtly love, a tradition which found its undeniable culmination in the Divine Comedy. In the esoteric Aristotelianism of the Fedeli d'amore, whose outer expression was romance and whose inner one alchemy, the split in the psyche of Christendom between the orthodox scholastic philosophy that culminated in Thomas Aquinas and the counter-ethos of romance, filled as it was with heterodox tendencies, a split that was in some ways expressed in the Albigensian Crusade, was triumphantly overcome. It was only the few, however, those perceptive enough to discern the form of holy wisdom through the veils of psychic concupiscence and social corruption, and courageous enough to brave the rigors of the path to her chamber, who could avail themselves of that triumph. What remained incomplete and wounded in the body of society nonetheless came to final completion in the Athanor, the alchemical vessel of the heart. In addition, there is some evidence that Aquinas himself could have been among that triumphant few. It was the overpowering vision he experienced shortly before his death at a Cistercian monastery that apparently inspired him to dictate his last work, a commentary on the Song of Songs. This is what led Jungian analyst Marie-Louise von Franz to speculate that his final ecstasy, in relation to which all his written works seemed to him like straw, might have been a vision of holy wisdom herself. But cultural Marxism, of course, hates holy wisdom, hates romance, hates Christianity, hates God, hates the traditional notion of beauty, and all but hates heterosexual love itself. Why is this? Because all these are pillars of Western civilization, and the global elites who employ and or manipulate the cultural Marxists have decided that Western civilization no longer serves their interests. Therefore, it must be destroyed, to be replaced by whatever has succeeded in destroying it, whether or not that ethos or that fragmented chaos is in any way viable in itself. In response to this unprecedented historical atrocity, I would say, closet romantics, find your roots and live by them. I would like to end by suggesting that anyone who's interested in researching this further get a hold of the book written by myself and my wife called Shadow of the Rose, the Esotericism of the Romantic Tradition. Thank you. So that's how you turn this off. Okay.